Okay. All right. This is our presentation on the book How to Be Anti-Racist. The author of the book is Ibram Zolani Kendi. He was born Henry Rogers, but now he changed his name, and Zolani meaning peace, and Kendi meaning loved one in Zulu. And then he majored in journalism, African American studies at Florida A&M University. He thought he was going to go into sports journalism. That is until he found that he wanted to make a change in the world and follow more so for the African American studies. He received his doctorate from Temple University with it's in African American studies, and then he's been affiliated with several scholarly universities, just to name a few: Harvard, Boston University, and Brown University. He published this book in 2019. The point of this book isn't to show America how to be anti-racist, but more so to be an equitable society, and that racism isn't rooted in government and racism is rooted in government and institutional policies. Kendi argues that a person is either racist or anti-racist. No neutral middle ground can be made when speaking between equality and inequality. So he defines racism as containing three components: racial inequalities, the racist policies that create these inequalities, and racist ideas that justify these policies. So a racist is someone who is supporting racist policy through their actions or inactions, or expressing racist ideas. An anti-racist is one who is supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. Kendi uses his own personal experiences from his life, from racism to anti-racism. In the introduction, Kendi explains how, as a young man, he held racist ideas himself, thinking that Black people were responsible for a lot of their own problems. Anti-racism is the only way to eradicate racism, and counsels the reader to remember that racist and anti-racist are not fixed, permanent states, but perhaps perches were occupied interchangeably. An example from the book, he tells stories of his parents' meeting, defines them as terms of racial inequalities, racist policies, and racist ideas. Both parents were part of conservative churches. After attending a soul liberation concert in 1970, they changed their mindsets. They then joined a Black Power movement where they stopped thinking about saving Black people and thought about liberating Black people. His parents became assimilations over the year, meaning that Blacks and whites should integrate and prove themselves as equal through hard work and impeccable moral conduct. And then Kendi defines racist policy in this chapter as a measure that produces or sustains radical inequality between racial groups. Kendi defines anti-racist policy as any measurement that sustains racial equality equality between racial groups. And then he believes that anti-racism counters racist ideas and racist policies. He does this by defining what policies are written and unwritten laws, rules, procedures, processes, regulations, and guidelines that govern people are either racist or anti-racist.
So in one of the following chapters in How to Be Racist by Kendi is a topic about biology and how biology has is a topic of discussion in How to Be Racist v Anti-Racist. As with many of his chapters, almost all of his chapters, I should say, he starts off by defining what is a biological racist versus what is a biological anti-racist. And then as the definitions show, a biological racist is one that who believes in the idea that the races are different in their biology and that these differences somehow create a sort of, it says hierarchy of value, but there's a better way to say it. It almost as putting someone above another person simply based on this biology. He then defines a biological anti-racist as one who is expressing the idea that the races are meaningfully the same in their biology, and there is no genetic racial differences. Basically stating that despite that the biology of all beings is essentially the same. He then goes on to talk about different viewpoints of how this biology, this idea of biological racist, very much so is taking place in policies today. And one of the things that stuck out in this chapter specifically is how do I the conversation of talking about about these policies and about this racist biological racist belief. One of the areas was when assimilationists who believe that talking about race constitutes racism, and that if people as a whole stop identifying by race, then racism will go away. They also believe that biologically they're one human race. Similarly, with segregationists, they also believe slightly different in 6 distinct biological races. To be anti-racist, though, the reason why this is of such importance is backtracking a little bit. If going back to the assimilationist view, if people stop using racial categories, then they will not be able to identify racial inequity amongst people. In turn, if we can identify racial inequality, we will not be able to identify racist policies. Then continuing in this sort of domino effect, if we cannot identify racist policies, that'll eventually lead to the if we can't identify them, it's going to be impossible to challenge them. How is someone going to challenge something that if they can't identify what is being challenged? So this really sort of defines what it means to be an anti-racist, which is to recognize that really the reality of biological equality, that skin color truly is meaningless to our underlying humanity, as he says, as the clothes that we all wear over our own skin. Continuing on then to the next chapter, which would be chapter 5 of ethnicity. Next. So then ethnicity, very in somewhat similar capacity to biology, starting again as Kembe does, is starting off each chapter by defining what is ethnic racism and what is ethnic anti-racism. Ethnic racism is a powerful collection of racist policies that lead to inequity between radicalized ethnic groups and substantiated by a racist idea about said ethnic groups. On the opposite side of that, ethnic anti-racism is a powerful collection of anti-racist policies that lead to equity between the radicalized ethnic groups and are sustained by anti-racist ideas about said ethnic groups. Ethnic racism is, in a more simpler term, is when individuals express a racist idea about an ethnic group or support a racist policy toward that group in just a simpler way of explaining it. The anti-racist view is to view national and transnational ethnic groups as equal in all their differences. To be anti-racist is to challenge these racist policies that really plague radicalized ethnic groups across the world. The really significant point of this chapter as a whole is if someone truly wants to be an anti-racist in terms of ethnicity, they must view the inequities between all radicalized ethnic groups as a problem of policy, not just a problem of people, but like of the policies that allow this, that are allowing this to happen and keeping it in place.
All right, so for the next one, I did chapter 10, which is called White. And this one stuck out to me most because Kennedy uses his own personal experiences to realize at times he can be racist himself. Kennedy refers to his personal life when he was attending Florida A&M University. He was eager watching and waiting for the 2000 presidential results, where it so happened hundreds of thousands of votes went unaccounted for. More precisely, Black votes were missing. Thousands of votes were missing out of the state of Florida. First, Kennedy realized he was being racist towards his own Black people. He was mad that he blamed the Black people for not going out to vote more, and that was the reason the presidential election was lost, thinking it was lack of votes from the African-American community, whereas it was the system that had failed Kennedy and the people of Black color yet again. Florida state government had purged over 200,000 ballots in the state and blocked recounts from being able to happen. This was a precise setup and rigged system against Black people and voters. Though it wasn't the Blacks' fault individually, Kennedy realized and blamed himself too. A Black individual can hold racist ideas and be angry at the Black community, where instead of blaming the real problem, the rigged government system. After the election, Kennedy began to assume and believe that all white people were evil, no matter what circumstance. Kennedy began to read the book and the work of Elijah Muhammad called The Nation of Islam, where the author argued that an evil Black scientist had created white people through eugenics thousands of years ago, way before Moses civilized the white devil race, then going on to conquer Europe. Kennedy refers to this as being the same story white races tell Black people time and time after again. One race being savagely different from a superior one is introduced to the superior race and has saved them and colonized them through the means of slavery, which is not colonization at all. So after reading this chapter, I had found this video on the internet that Zach is going to pull up for me, and it talks strictly about this book only that was on Good Morning America. It's about 4.5 minutes long. Thank you. I don't have audio. Do you guys?
No.
What'd you say?
No audio.
No audio.
Time for our cover story and redefining the fight.
Can you hear it now?
Yep.
Against racism, a powerful discussion being had everywhere. You may be hearing this term thrown around quite a bit on social media, anti-racist. Deborah Roberts joins us now with more from expert minds, and there's a book out there, a best-selling book called How to Be Anti-Racist. Good morning to you, Deborah.
Good morning, TJ. Listen, there's no question we are a country that is in pain, but if there is a glimmer of hope in the midst of all of this, it's the conversations that are springing up lately. I've had them with family and friends and colleagues. Many are not people of color, but they are people with an aching heart and a deep desire to see change in this country, and most important, within themselves.
For Jamie Jones Coleman, those protests challenging the status quo feel personal. Her husband of 10 years, Reggie, is black, and they're raising 2 biracial sons, Caleb and Gabriel.
My boys are viewed in this world as black. And as a parent, as a white parent of a multiracial child, it's imperative upon me to try and help prepare them for their world the best that I can.
Her multiracial family, she says, has opened her eyes.
I think the biggest thing that I've realized being married to a black man in the United States today is that when people meet me, they never fear me.
Racial disparities and inequities are everywhere, are all around us, are in almost every neighborhood and institution.
In his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, author and professor Ibram X. Kendi offers a blueprint for creating a just society and says change begins with understanding and clearly defining terms like racist and anti-racist.
There's no such thing as not racist. In other words, we're either being racist or anti-racist. We're either expressing that the racial groups are equals, and we believe that, or we're thinking that certain racial groups are better or worse than others.
So what does it mean to be anti-racist?
What it means to be anti-racist is to express anti-racist ideas, meaning all the racial groups are equals. There's no racial group is better or worse than another. And also to advocate for anti-racist policies. And these are policies that lead to racial equity and justice.
Anti-racism is a verb. It's a behavior.
Jennifer Harvey, an author who writes about white parents raising kids in a just society, says creating a new normal may be uncomfortable, but change usually is.
A lot of white Americans might feel afraid or it might feel uncomfortable to start talking about race. But of course, that's nothing like the fear that Black families live with all the time. Start speaking. We might make mistakes, but we'll get better at it.
For those invested in change, she offers this advice. Educate yourself.
This is not the time to ask your Black friends or ask your neighbor what you need to know about racism. We can buy Black scholars' books. We can download and support podcasts. We can watch media that people of color have produced.
Donate.
Actively support, both locally and nationally, people of color, businesses, racial justice groups, elected officials.
Protest.
Show up to stand with people of color in your community who are in the streets fighting for change.
And understand your role.
For me to listen to people of color, to listen to their experiences, to know their truth as best as I can, knowing that I will never be in their same world, but I can respect that world and I can listen to their words.
If there's anything that seems to be different right now, is that so many are digging deep and searching for information. Books on justice and equality seem to be flying off the shelves or certainly out of the bookstores. But the experts caution, TJ, as you know, that this can't be a one and done thing, a one book or let's take a look at this one time. Long-term commitment, they say, is all about awareness and action. And as you heard in the piece just now, anti-racist behavior is a verb, an action verb. I thought that was actually very interesting.
And Deb, you know, when anytime something comes up, anyone is accused of doing something, the first thing they say is, I'm not racist.
Right.
And they're saying now, Deb, that that's not good enough just to say you're not racist. You have to be active these days. And I'm sure you're having a lot of conversations. I'm getting a lot of calls from white friends kind of checking in about behavior, if you will.
All right, so I thought that video was very important to use as for a biracial family or a white parents who are adopting children of color, the things that these children have to go to, getting bullied at school due to race, and then coming home and these parents not exactly knowing how to deal with it because they can relate to it on a certain level, but they can never understand. So that's why I chose that one. So after reading this book, we're getting short on time here. I think there are a few things that we can take away from this book. One being the opposite of racist is not racist. To not be racist means to be an anti-racist. Being a racist or an anti-racist is not a fixed trait. Many can be an anti-racist, but have a racist idea at some point in time. Racism is wrapped in the judicial system and in the government, if we want to believe it or not. We have learned that the system has made it way harsher for people of color to do simple things like going out and to get a vote. It is our job as anti-racists to take affirmative action. And in doing this, we have to see that all racist groups are created equal. We have to advocate against these racist policies that exist today. To talk about these topics might put people on edge, but it's a conversation that needs to happen in a society that we are in today, especially at this generation. To educate yourself is the most important. It's as easy as reading this book. It was very an eye-opening experience for me, as how simple all of my friends think they're anti-racist, but at certain points in times they are racist. So I think that we all just need to stand up, protest, as the video said, get our point across. And I think in a few years, all of us could be an anti-racist and not be considered a racist with racist thoughts. And that is our conclusion in this book and video.
All right. Great job.
Did anyone time it?
I did not time it, but
I did, and it